Hello and welcome to the Sales Leaders series. I'm your host, Freddie, where I'll be gathering B2B SaaS sales leaders from across the world to answer 5 short, topical B2B SaaS sales questions. These questions are going to be the same each week, bar one, giving you insight and different perspectives into how top performers within the industry think, as well as actionable advice you guys can use in your own selling careers. Our guest this week is Jason George. Jason has over 20 years of experience in senior sales roles. He started his senior career at Blackberry, where he spent 10 years scaling sales and driving revenue until he moved into SaaS. Jason is currently at Auvik Networks, a cloud-based network management company, scaling sales and overseeing a sales team of 50 sales professionals as vice president. Among other passions, Jason serves as a coach and director for the Milton Winterhawks, a youth ice hockey team based in Ontario, Canada. Jason, it's great to have you on the show. How are you?
Great to see you, Freddie. How are you doing?
Really, really well. So this Sales Leaders series, as you already know, we're going to run through 5 short, simple questions where we're going to get your thoughts, Jason, on 4 sales lead questions, as well as an extra question at the end that our guest from the previous episode has left for you. How does that sound?
Sounds like fun. Let's do it.
Perfect. So let's just jump straight into this. First question is, when thinking about how you've grown revenue over those 20 years, and more specifically thinking about your time in software rather than hardware sales, is there one thing or maybe a combination of ways of thinking or frameworks that you've used that has made the biggest difference for you in growing that revenue at different companies as well as Auvik?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm actually going to challenge the premise of the question a little bit. Growing revenue, to me, it's not an action. It's not a goal. It's a result. I see my job is to put the strategy, the structure, the process in place so the sales team can, effectively execute. And the result of that execution is growing revenue. For us, the most important action I think we take as a sales organization is we have a pretty relentless focus on sales process across every role in the team. Every member of the sales organization has a role in executing or supporting or coaching to our sales process. And what that accomplishes is, I think I can say this pretty comfortably. It creates a world-class buying experience for our customers. And the result of that buying experience is revenue growth. I don't get the chance to sort of publicly brag on my team very often. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to take this opportunity and do it. Because of my role, I get sold to quite a bit. So I see a lot of other sellers. And I'll tell you that our sellers executing our sales process, I would put them up against anybody in the world. They're that good.
Fantastic. And I guess with such as sales, as you know, right, there is so much changing consistently, whether that's, best practices or, certain economic conditions that make it harder for people to sell. How do you create the environment within your teams to make sure that is a continual, source of, change where you can create those processes to make sure that you are making sure that you've got a great buying experience on the other end and therefore growing that revenue? But how do you create that environment?
Yeah, it's interesting. I started thinking about this yesterday. The risk. How do you create it? It's consistency. It has to be the thing you focus on all the time. And the risk that sort of is the other side of that coin is, and I think it's a really consistent risk with any scale up stage company, right? And so, companies go through different stages and we're very much at scale up right now. And it's diversification. So moving from one product to multiple products as a company is a very difficult thing to do. Moving from one lead source to multiple lead sources is a really difficult thing to do. If you're an inbound organization and then, you want to diversify your top of funnel mix, add in channel, add in outbound, add in referral at like, that's hard. Because all those combinations, they behave differently. So you set up a machine to, let's say, do inbound, and now you want to add channel, and channel behaves differently. And so how do I target that? How do I incent on that? How do I set quotas on that? All that kind of stuff is tricky. And that part of the growth is like, it's really messy and it's pretty volatile. And so you kind of have to accept that you're going to do things that aren't going to work. And the funny thing is, you're also going to have to accept that good things are going to happen and you have no idea why. Like, I didn't predict them, and you're like, what just happened there? And that was awesome. And why did that happen?
Yeah.
And so the way we approach this, it sounds way easier than it is. We try to focus on one or two big things at a time. It sounds kind of trite, and I'll tell you, I mess this up all the time by asking the team to take on too much, but it's a discipline, we try to hold ourselves to as a sales leadership team. It's like, let's pick a couple things and just do those things. And when we successfully do it, when we maintain that kind of focus for, say, a quarter, it's amazing what can happen when you're just focused on one or two things.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think that feeling is definitely consistent with all salespeople. And I guess it's one of the things that's so important about recording things, right? And I guess narrowing your focus on certain things so you understand what it has this caused certain success, and being able to pinpoint those certain markers. Really interesting. Second question: what is the biggest challenge in your selling teams? And what is the biggest challenge they're facing currently? I know obviously you manage 50 salespeople at Auvik. In your opinion, what's the biggest challenge they're seeing day to day, and how are you currently tackling it?
Certainly the diversification piece that we just talked about, that's a big challenge, and it's a challenge for us because we're in that scale up journey. I think people growth, when you're growing a team, that's really stressful as well, and you really have to rely on the skills of your frontline sales leaders. And for us, I think that's, for me, that's something, it's a high priority item for me for, the next 12 months, is to heavily invest in the skills of my frontline sales leaders, because those are the folks who really make they make the business happen.
Makes sense. I guess on that point, is that something that is it when hiring for those sort of sales leaders, when thinking about growing your teams in the future?
Yeah.
Is that something you're thinking from day one, or is it kind of like, I'm going to hire a certain individual, with certain traits and just try and level them up as much as I can? It's kind of a shot in the dark, really. Or is it you're just looking for certain traits and skills in certain people that, and what would those traits and skills be?
Yeah, sales leaders are a different profile than top flight sales reps. To be an effective sales leader, you have to be able to achieve your targets as an individual contributor. You won't have the credibility as a sales leader if you can't prove that you can do the thing. But your very, very, very best salespeople it's incredibly rare for them to be effective managers. The instincts are just totally different. They're almost inverse. So yeah, you are, I do look for very specific things when looking for sales leaders. And for me, the most basic question is why. Like, why would you want to be a sales leader, right? Like, I've been doing it for a long time and I absolutely love it. But there's a lot of difficulty, challenge, uncomfortable conversations that you have to have for doing it. So why do you want to put yourself through those tough things? What's in it for you? And understanding the underlying motivator is really, for me, the primary driver, the primary qualifier might be the way to think about it for somebody taking on a sales leadership role.
Makes sense. Okay. Third question. So, you've been in sales for over 20 years. Now, thinking about your time in software, I can imagine that you've seen a lot of change in software. sales, right? I mean, we see it daily, really, right? What do you think will be the most important factor of success in B2B software sales over the next year and over the next 5 years?
So I think it goes beyond software sales. And so the way I think about this one, because I'm Canadian, I think it's the law that I have to use a hockey analogy. So I'm going to use a hockey analogy.
Please do. Please do.
There are a lot of skills needed to be a good hockey player, right? You need about puck handling, angling, checking, the ability to see the play develop, that kind of thing. The thing is, there's one skill in hockey without which you can't be a good player. You can be good at all those other things, but if you aren't an excellent skater, you are not a good hockey player. If you look at the best hockey players in the world, they are so good at skating. It is so natural for them that it kind of disappears into the background, and all their other skills come forward and they can shine through. So for me, like the process of selling is like skating in hockey. Process sounds like a bit of a scary word to a lot of salespeople, right? Like, I'm a relationship seller, or you can't sell from a script, or if you want me to do that, you just hire a robot, or whatever the case is, right? Sales process is like, it's nothing more than a consistent way to have a conversation with someone or a group of people to help them make a good decision about your product, right? Like, there's certain piece of information you need to exchange to get to a good decision. There's certain people who need to be involved in the conversation who have the ability or authority to make a good decision. And so sales process is really structuring your way through the conversation so that you don't make mistakes and you don't miss things. And if you can figure out your sales process and sort of help your team adopt it as like an indelible part of your culture, you're going to have success. Like, it's that simple. And once you get really good at it, the process actually fades into the background a little bit. And all those other skills come to the fore. And it's when that happens, it's something to see. It's really something to see.
I mean, I guess in a way that's similar to sort of stripping back all of the extras in sales that people like to talk about and going, just the fundamentals, right? Just being able to speak to people and just try and figure out in a very personal way, can we actually help you? If so, great. If not, no, okay, that's fine, right?
Right. Exactly. I want to make sure that you don't, that you're, the things that help that person make a decision come out on the table. And that you don't miss something because you were careless, you forgot, they dragged the conversation in a direction that wasn't terribly productive, because customers, they never do that. They never drag the conversation somewhere that doesn't really go anywhere. Right. So it really is about giving yourself that framework and the license to guide the conversation. And like, the thing is, you have to remember, like, you talk about your stuff, you engage with buyers about your stuff every day. You actually know how to get to a good decision. They talk about your stuff, depending on the business you're in, once every 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, 36 months. They are not the experts in getting to a good decision when they're talking about your stuff or your category of stuff. So the process just gives you the license to guide that conversation.
Makes sense. And I guess I'd also add on that as well, that, transparency is a big thing on that front. And it's just being transparent throughout that whole entire process. Means that you can just, I guess, help your buyers not only understand your process, because you do this for a living, right? Whereas, I mean, they don't buy software for a living, right? They've got a million other things to do. So I guess how do you maintain that transparency throughout the sales process? Is it like you say, just that process, that framework, and just making that really ingrained in all of your salespeople, or is what would you say to that?
Yeah, I would say Like it's a bit of a Pareto thing, right? Like there's a few things that make a huge difference. And so there's some basic stuff like focus on problems. Like every conversation needs to start with problems. Why are we here? Why are we consuming our incredibly scarce time together? Well, it's because you need to solve this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. Is this still the set of problems that we're focused on together? And then the other end is next steps. Like if we get to the end of a conversation, great. So we've agreed that this has been a productive conversation and we want to keep going. Let's get together again Thursday at 4:00. Is that good? Right? You do problems and next steps better than anybody else, and you will set yourself in probably the top 5% of salespeople in the world.
Yeah. He's stripping back to just not the basics. I guess it's very hard to maintain that process, but it's so powerful.
Yeah. And you have to do it all the time, right? Like the best athletes, they practice those fundamentals all the time.
Yeah. It's a great analogy. Fourth question. Sales is a very up and down career, very emotional at times, right? What has been the toughest moment in your sales career? And how have you dealt with it? And I guess on top of that, what advice would you give to other salespeople looking at you, at your role and everything that you've achieved? What advice would you give to them to make sure that they don't make the same mistake, or not necessarily the same mistake, but just how to deal with it better?
Yeah.
Deal with.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? Maybe the way to think about it, there's a framework I use when I coach youth sports. So you're going to lose games. You might have an off day. The other team might have a great day. Or it's possible they're just better than you are. It's going to happen. You're going to lose games. There's a big difference though between losing and getting beat. Right? Getting beat means you didn't live up to your capabilities. It means you didn't put in the effort. It means, at some level you kind of gave up. I can accept losing. I'm not a big fan of it. I'm in sales, so I hate getting beat. Like just this conversation about getting beat, the hair on the back of my neck is starting to stand up. Like my face is probably going red. I hate getting beat. And I got beat a few times early in my career before I got some really good coaching. And so sort of going back to, seems to be a recurring theme here around sort of the process and guiding conversations. I use that experience as the fuel to keep me focused on the strategy, the structure, and the process that our team needs to make sure we don't get beat. And we need to change topics because getting beat just makes it crazy.
Well, there's a different lighter question now, and this is the final question. This is it.
Yeah.
The question that's submitted by Adam Baker. Adam Baker, CEO of Dealpad. He's our previous guest. Now, he asks, what channel do you think is going to be the most important for generating pipeline in software sales over the next 5 year to 5 years? And is that a combination of channels like we've seen recently, with multi-set, things like that? Or do you think social selling is going to just become a much more important piece of the jigsaw of generating that pipe? I mean, where do you see that sort of playing out?
It's interesting you use the word channel because I think the answer actually is channel. It's resellers. If you don't have a true channel strategy, I think you're putting your business at risk. I'm going to say it that directly. If you don't have an effective method to engage people who already have relationships with customers, and this becomes more and more and more important the earlier you are in your stage. If you're Fortune 500 software company, do you need a channel? Yes, but how important is it? It's an important part of your mix. But you're not going out of business if you don't have it, or if something goes sideways. If you're a startup or a scale up, if you're sub $200 million and you don't have a channel strategy, there is one of two things is happening. Either there's something endemic to your business that makes a channel strategy impossible, or my advice would be go back and look at your strategy.
Makes sense. And I guess what if you don't mind me asking, what's the sort of split? What do you think is a healthy split of those channel styles compared to, like I say, new pipe?
Yeah, that one is really dependent on your business, who you're selling to, and what problem it is you're solving. My argument would be your channel strategy has to drive enough revenue that it's too big to fail. And sort of the classic definition of that is at least 10%. But you're think about it in terms of, if channel went away, we would really hurt as a business. And if you can't get channel to that point, my advice is take another look at your strategy.
Jason, that was the final question that we had today. It was a pleasure having you on the Sales Leading series. Obviously, it's very short and snappy. Is there anything else that you would like to leave the audience with? Any other parting notes, final things?
Yeah, I think if I talk about sales process again, they'll probably switch off the phone.
Yeah, we get it.
So, yeah, it's, I think it was a really interesting conversation. Channel, sales process, if you can figure out those things, and as an individual seller, if you can figure out, if you're an individual seller listening to this conversation, and you forget everything else, you remember nothing else, my advice would be to remember this. Problems and next steps are your best friends as a seller. If you can become an expert in uncovering problems, if you can become comfortable with and really good at making next steps happen, asking for the next meeting, you will set yourself above most salespeople out there.
Fantastic advice. And if any of you listening or watching this podcast want to find more about Jason, Auvik, or anything that we discussed, some of the questions in this podcast, there'll be notes, links, and a few resources in the show notes down below. Jason, it's been a pleasure. I really, really appreciate you taking the time. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Freddie. Yeah, it was great to chat with you.
Likewise. Until next time. Cheers, guys. Cheers, Jason.
Cheers.